Hi everyone, I'm James from James Dean Designs, and if you're interested in building the 3018 PRO CNC machine, then stick around because that's what we're doing in this episode. So this is episode 2 as part of a 4-episode series. Episode 1 was unboxing and checking all the parts were there. Episode 2 is building it today. Episode 3 is testing everything's working. Episode 4 will be testing out the laser module that we've also brought for it. If you haven't checked out the last episode, there should be a link below the video so you can have a look at that. But for now, let's get started. So all the parts have been laid out. I've tried to put them in some sort of logical order to help when assembling. We have the feet and the short piece of aluminium extrude and the short bars. That's going to be for the base. We've then got the side pieces, the longer pieces of aluminium extrude and the longer bars, and those are going to be for the sides and then the x-axis. So what we're going to start with first is assembling the sliders ready for the bed. So these are your sliders. You've got 4 of one kind and one that's a little bit different. It's got a groove cut out. That takes the brass holding nut a little bit later. The pieces we need for these are the 10 large clamping nuts, and also the short stubby M6 bolts. What you want to do with these is push the bolt through. With a little clamping nut, you need the little slanted sides to be facing upwards. You just want to spin them on, only 1 or 2 turns. You need to keep these quite loose because we'll need a little bit of playing them later on. We'll just do the same for each one. Right, with those done, we'll now bring over the bed. What you'll notice is one side has 3 grooves, the other side has 4 grooves. It's the 3 grooves that we're interested in, and these will take the sliders. You may also notice that the bolts and the clamps are slightly offset. When we're putting those in, we want to keep those to the outside of the table for each side. These can take a little bit of fiddling about to get them in, but do persevere. The one that I mentioned earlier that has the piece taken out, this goes in the middle. And then again, keeping the bolts towards the outside. Right, we're just going to pinch these up by hand. We still need to keep a little bit of movement in them, but we do want them to roughly remain in place. Next thing we're going to want is the runner bars and also the threaded bar. We'll put the runner bars in first. They should just slide straight through. And then we'll put the thread bar in last. What this requires is the brass nut I was on about earlier, and this just helps keep tension on the thread bar. You want to place that inside and push it in quite deep. And then insert the thread bar and just keep twisting it until it engages with that brass nut. There we are. We'll just roughly get that in halfway. Okay. and that should do for that for now. We'll put that to one side. Next thing we're going to look at is the two end plates. We need similar clamping bolts on these, and what we're going to use is the other smaller ones that go with the M5 nuts. And we'll need 12 of these. And we'll also need 12 of the longer M5 bolts. And what we're just going to do is put these little clamping bolt nuts into here so they're ready for the sides. What you need to bear in mind is the one side that has the big hole through, it has the indentation cut out. That's the outside. That's the side we need the clamps on. So we place those, apologies, it's the other way around. Place those through. And similarly, you want to keep the arrows pointing away. And we'll just give those 1 or 2 turns. We need to keep those quite loose. That's it. And we'll do that for the rest of them. These ones are even fiddlier than the large ones. That's one done. With the second, one side has a bearing, the other side doesn't. And we need the side with the bearing to have the little clamping nuts. Right, with those on, we're going to bring the 2 shorter pieces of aluminium extrude over. And what you need to do is on one side of them, I don't know if the camera can see that, is just mark a line that's 48mm in. You need to do that for both of them. These will sit on the outside and they just allow the end plates the correct depth in. So what we're going to try and do now is get all of these little clamping nuts into here. It can be fiddly, so just keep trying to get them in. Different techniques work better for different people. Just going to try laying them flat and then turning them to the right angle. There we are. Once those are in place, you want to get the end plate onto that line that we've already marked and just pinch them up. That's one done. We'll now move on to the second one. That one went in much easier. Similarly again, we just want to take it to the line marked at 48mm and tighten those up. What I generally tend to do is once I've tightened a series up like this, I'll just go back and check that the first ones that I tightened up are also still tight. Make sure the pressure's just applied evenly. Okay, now we're going to put those to one side. We're going to bring our base back in. What we're going to do now is attach the feet to one end. We're going to start with the one that takes the motor. We're going to put the motor on that first. So these are your stepper motors, and what they require is one of the little couplers that help it connect to the threaded bar. You'll notice there are a couple of little grub screws in here, and those just help clamp it on. You'll also notice one end has a small hole, one end has a big hole. The small end goes onto the motor and the big end goes onto the threaded bar. The little grub screws just need to connect with the flat plate on the motor there. So we'll slide that on. And then we'll just pinch those little grub screws up. These do need to be quite tight, but remember these are fine threads, so you don't want to over tighten them. This goes on the side that's got the indentation in, so we'll place that in. And what you want to do is keep the connection port pointing to the right hand side of the feet when it's at the back. To connect this to the feet, we need the 4 small M3 bolts, and these are the shorter ones. Just want to drop those in and just screw them in gently with your fingers to begin with until you get all 4 in. So you've got a little bit of play to allow it to find the holes. And then once you've got all 4 in, you can tighten them up. I'll apologise at this point if you heard some weird noises in the background. It's quite windy here, and although the shed's insulated, it still gets through. I'll just make sure those are all tight. I think they are. Okay. What we need to do now is just release the other 2 grub screws a little bit and make sure that the passage inside is clear for the threaded bar to go on. Right, now obviously the bed is upside down at the moment, so we also want to mount the foot upside down. We'll just place that over. I'm just going to slacken that off a little bit more. You want to make sure the threaded bar fits all the way in. There we are. Now once you've got the threaded bar in place, what you want to do is tighten the little grub screws up, but do them evenly. So tighten one up, turn it over, tighten the other one up, do both gently, then turn it back again and pinch them tight. This just allows the thread bar to stay more centered in the hole. And again, these are quite fine threads and it's aluminium, so don't over tighten. There we are. Now we're going to connect these bars to the feet as well, and for those we just need the shorter M5 bolts. And what we're going to do is we just want to get these in just again finger tight, so we push them through, align them with the bars and just tighten them up until they're finger tight. This is one of the reasons we left a little bit of play in these sliders, is just to allow everything to align easier. And bring a few more of these over. Right, next thing we're going to do is get the other foot on. Now the side with the bearing needs to sit on the inside of the motor, on the inside of the bed. So we're going to put that in place. And again, just put some of those M5 bolts through and get them finger tight. Right, at this stage what I'm going to do is just try and make sure that this roughly is square with either end. You can adjust this later on, but I'm just doing it now so I can show you. Although there's still a little bit of play in this, you want to try and get it roughly even from both sides. Pinch those back up. One of the easiest way to do this is just use a ruler. Slide this this over a little bit and square it back up. And now I'm just going to tighten all of these back up, and this will hold the bed in place. Just check the others are still tight. Perfect. At this stage I'm now going to flip it all over so it's sitting the right way up. And we're going to bring in each of the sides. I'll do this one first just because the camera's closest to it. What we're going to need is 2 of the M5 bolts for either side. I've done 4 over for this now. You just want to roughly get that in place and get the bolts through, and again just pinch them up by hand. You get one in one side and then do the other side. And then work on the others. The holes should roughly align, so they should go in quite easy. There we are. We'll do this one as well. Right. Again, at this stage you don't want to over tighten them. You just want a slightly little bit of play, and that will allow us to make sure everything's square shortly. I want to turn this round again. And get 4 more of the M5 bolts. And we'll get the last side in place. Now it may seem obvious, but one thing you want to do when building this is make sure it's being built on a flat surface. If you're building it on a work surface or a piece of wood that's got a slight warp in it, what that will do is twist the bed at the same time. So with everything finger tight, I'm just going to roughly check that everything's still quite square, and then get the bolts tightened up. Most of the time you won't need to put this at the full 90-degree angle to tighten them up. Just keeping them on the long length and doing it with your fingers should be sufficient. Now what we want to do is just make sure the bed moves freely back and forth, which it does. Excellent. And that's the base built. What we're going to start to do now is assemble the Z-axes. And the first thing to do is to get the little motor in place, the stepper motor. So again, we'll need a stepper motor, and we'll need one of the couplers, and we'll put that on first. So remember, the 2 little grub screws should align with the flat edge on the bar. Big head is for the hole is for the threaded bar. Little end hole is for the stepper motor. I'm just going to tighten that up. Again, you just want to remember this needs to be tight, but you don't want to over tighten them. This sits in this end here, the one with the indent, and to hold that in place we're going to need 4 of the M3 bolts. I'm just going to turn this around so you can see when it goes in. And what you want to aim to do is have the connection pointing towards the back. So if we put that in place, similarly again, just put these in with your fingers. You just want it in enough to grip the thread, but you don't want it too tight. You need a little bit of play to allow all 4 of these to get in. Alright, and then once all 4 are in, you just want to pinch them up with the Allen key. Again, not too tight. And just working round, make sure the pressure is applied evenly. Excellent. Alright, so I'm just going to push that to one side for the moment. And what I'm going to do is bring in the other 2 pieces of extruded aluminium. And we need the 4 remaining small clamp bolts. For the moment, I'm just going to place these in and put the bolts into them. These will take the circuit board a little bit later on, but I'll add that in later. However, these need to go in now, otherwise you can't fit them in. To hold these in, we're using the smallest of the M5 bolts. I'm just going to put those in again, finger tight. They'll be loose, but it's irrelevant at the moment. Alright, now the next thing to do is we're going to fix these into the back as they all fall out. I'm just going to turn this round. To hold these in place, we'll need 4 of the remaining long M5 bolts. What we're just going to do is get these roughly in place, and again, you just want to put them in finger tight. I'm not going to tighten these up too much because we need a little bit of play to get the rest of the bars in. But we'll leave them like that for now. I'm going to bring in the motor now. So this is one of the most important parts, and the way this moves, it'll go left and right, but you need to make sure that the spindle is on the bottom and the connections are on the top. We're going to put the threaded bar into this now. Just going to move this out of the way slightly. And similarly with the other threaded bar, what we need to do, actually, no, we're not going to do that yet. What I'm going to do first is get the 2 runner bars in place. And they just slide through. And then we're going to get these held in place on the machine. And again, to do that, we'll need 2 of the M5 long bolts for each side. I'm going to turn this around so you can see. Again, just getting them in, finger tight. And now for the other side. What we can now do is pinch all these up and just pull everything back together. I'm going to start with doing the ones for the aluminium extrusion. When tightening these up, you just want to make sure that the aluminium extrusion doesn't twist. Right, and now we'll tighten the ones for the bar up. Right, now we're going to put the threaded bar through. I'm just going to turn this round so you can see. Right, similarly with the other one, we've got the little brass nut and we've got the spring. That needs to go in this position here. Now you just want to push the threaded bar through the bearing. Hold that in quite deep. Thread it through. Just keep threading that all the way through until it comes out of the other side. There we are. Now what we just need to do on the coupler is release the little grub screws to allow this to go in. Bring those quite far out and turn it round. Do the other one. And then thread the bar all the way through. Right. You'll know it's in as deep as it can because it's now moving the motor. And then we just want to pinch those grub screws back up. Again, doing it evenly each side. A couple of turns on the one, a couple of turns on the other. Back to the first one, pinch it up tight. And then to the second one, and again just make sure that's tight. Now that's the base, the side, the X, Y and Z axis all in place. The next thing to do is the electronics. So the first thing we want to do with the electronics is make sure that the circuit board is mounted on the back. This sits on this side. Just going to pull these over for now and take these back out. Right, let's bring over the circuit board. Now this sits on the back, and say it sits on this side, and you want to try and keep it this way up ideally. These are all the connections for the X, Y and Z axes, and they stay on the top. We've also got just some mounts for these. So what we're going to do is put the nut through, the mount on the back. Just going to get the Allen key for this and then get that into the hole. The threads on these can be quite short, but you just need to get it pinched in. That's that one done. And then we'll do the one on the bottom. Now these two are probably the most awkward. Luckily, if you don't over tighten the first ones, you have a little bit of play here. That's in place, just slide that in. There we are. And finally the last one. I tuck that up, that through. I'll try and get that through, I should say. There we are. And now push the nut into place. There we are. Now this is a circuit board, you really do not want to over tighten these, just finger tight. Okay, so now we're going to bring over the different cables. You should have 3 of these cables, and these are to control the different axes. The X-axis, the Y-axis, and then the Z-axis. They are listed on the circuit board, starting from X on the left hand side. You have 2 Y-axis ports. You only need 1 for this. This only has 1 Y-axis motor, so we're just going to concentrate on the first one, and then the last one is the Z port. So we'll get these connected. The connectors have little grooves on one side and then a flat on the other side, and this is just so you know which way they go in. Help if I got the right connector. So one is wider, one is shorter, and I was putting it the wrong way in. Just going to push them in gently. This controls the Z-axis, so this will go in the Z-axis port. Now we'll do the X-axis again, just to show you one is wider, so the wider one goes directly into the motor. And this goes into the X port. And last we have the Y motor. Place that in. Okay. The last cable we have is the power to the main rotor motor. And this is this connection here. You'll see it's got a little lip part, and this is just to hook it on there. So if you slide that over, you should hear it click. There we are. And then this just goes to the motor. The motor should be marked up with a positive and a negative on either side. I will just flip this over. So if you can see, the positive has got a little red dot next to it and the other side hasn't, so that means this is the positive, that side's the negative. It's not the end of the world if you get them the wrong way around. What it just means is your motor will spin the opposite direction that it actually should. Push that on. And then we push that on. Now, as you can see, this is all a little bit untidy, so what we're just going to do now is use some zip ties and tidy all the cables up. I've got quite a few small zip ties here. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that the Z-axis and the motor here, this moves left and right, whereas these two motors don't move. So you can coil these cables up. You don't want to coil them too much, you can give them a bit of a loose coil. So we'll start with that. So I'll leave a little bit of play in them. But then we'll get a zip tie round. Then what I'm going to do is zip tie these together. You never want these to be too tight, you want to allow a slight little bit of play in them, but I'm just going to put one every 10 to 15 centimetres so. And now one cable is slightly longer than the other, so I'm just going to leave that. Actually what I'll do is just put another one around that just to take the loop. So I'm going to put one more on this to tidy this little loop up here. I'm just going to cut all the ends off with some snips. Be careful obviously not to snip the wire. Let's move those out of the way. There's one last piece that we haven't done, and that's put in a collet on the bottom. Now, similarly to earlier, this has a flat side, as you can see there, and you have the little grub screws on the collet. So we're just going to slacken those off first. And then make sure one is aligned to the flat edge. Just slacken those off a little bit more. And once that's pushed up and in place, just tighten them back up. Turn it round, tighten the back one up. Again, you do want these to be quite tight, but you don't want to over tighten them because they are fine threads. Excellent. And that is built. Looking at this again, what I'm going to do is pull these cables around the outside of this just to tidy it up rather than being over the top, because there's more chance of them getting caught there. And take these off. I'm just going to pass them through the side. I don't want it going too close to the spindle. I'm just going to take it through one part and then over the top and then on there. And there is just quite a bit of clearance there from the spindle. Same this side. Just checking that they don't come close to the motor. Excellent. Once everything is complete, just go around and do a final check on all the bolts and screws and make sure that they're as tight as they need to be. So that pretty much wraps this episode up. We've got the 3018 Pro CNC machine all built and the wires are connected. If you have any questions, please ask me in the comments below. In the next episode, we're going to be connecting it up to the laptop, making sure all the motors function correctly and everything moves as it should. We'll also be doing a few test pieces as well. Thank you very much for watching. If you're not already subscribing, then please do so and follow me on Instagram for more regular updates. I'll see you on the next episode.